Hey, this is Trey. Got another update here for CFL. This time it's version 1.3.2, which changes some code, a little bit of optimization, and adds in a new color grading feature. So let's get started. As usual with my presets, the end key opens up the ENB menu. If you need to change that, by the way, you can go over here to this top left window, click on input, and key combination. If you want to set the default settings for ENB, you can set your combination key to shift, and you can go editor, and then press enter. And now you can use shift enter to open and close the menu. Personally, I prefer to use the end key. Oh, bear in mind, if you change that to shift enter, you will then need to use shift plus scroll lock to toggle. And scroll lock is currently the toggle key. Okay, got that out of the way. Let's go over the new features in 1.3.2. Quickly, I did not make a video for 1.3.1, so let's go over some of the looks that were added in 1.3.1. First is attic, and also added Maximus. I can't remember if that was before 1.3.1 or not. And there's also Superb and Wes. Okay, so those are the new looks. Let's go back to Tetrachrome. In the new 1.3.2 update, there is now a saturation control in the camera section, in addition to a post-saturation control in the color grading section. And the difference between the two is basically where the effect actually happens. In the camera section, saturation happens before you get to the look. Meaning, for example, let's go to Warsaw. Warsaw gets rid of a lot of color and only leaves a little bit of everything except it leaves in a lot of skin tones and the color red. So if I push saturation here in the camera, you'll see that I'm not getting a lot of color changes in the grays, but I'm getting a lot of changes in the yellows and oranges and reds. But if I enable color grading and I push the saturation here, now the whole image does get a lot more saturated, including the grays turning very blue. So that's kind of a basic demonstration of the difference between the two. The camera section is applying the color before you get to the color grade or film emulation, and the other one is post, meaning it happens after this. The grain has been tweaked as well. I've adjusted the film grain to look more like actual 35mm film, and I did this by grabbing a 35mm film grain scan, overlaying it over the top of a screenshot that I took with grain disabled, and then took another screenshot with grain enabled as I made adjustments until I got grain that matched the grain scan. And I'm quite happy with the result. It looks quite realistic. But it's still user adjustable. You can turn it down or you can turn it up. Also in the new update, the vignette and the letterbox code has been completely changed. Excuse me. You now have a ratio control for vignette, and the ratio for letterbox is now simpler. So if you need a 2:3:5 ratio, you can just type 2:3:5. And also is this handy little feature that says sync vignette ratio to letterbox. So basically, if you have this unchecked, the vignette, I'll turn it up so you can see it. Let's go back to Tetrachrome really quickly. I'll turn vignette amount up. I mean, I would never play with this kind of crazy vignette, but it's there so you can see what's going on. Let's turn off letterbox quickly. So adjust the vignette ratio. It'll close in. And the reason that is because different people have, different monitor setups. Some people have 21:9 monitors. Some people, I'm sure there's somebody out there that has a 4:3 monitor that's not actually widescreen. If you want to do that, the vignette ratio would be 1.33. But yeah, let's set this to something crazy so that it can be seen. As you can see, it's darkening a lot of the edge here. If I turn on letterbox, you can barely see that the letterbox popped up. But if I select sync vignette ratio to letterbox, suddenly this value becomes ignored, and now the vignette looks to the letterbox ratio as its ratio. So as I adjust, if you want to, like, for example, let's use CinemaScope. Let's go to a 2 ratio. You can see that the vignette will follow the letterbox. You can see it closing in with the letterbox. And that's a handy little feature, and I think it's a much more natural looking vignette. And it's really quite subtle at lower values now. It's really hard to detect unless you really push it hard. All right, so now the big new feature, color grading. How does that actually work? That is what the new DC film looks were created for. They're not actually emulating film. The DC stands for digital camera. And the reason that they're in here, and they say red, is red is a brand of camera that's used in Hollywood. It's a very popular industry standard digital camera. From what I've seen, you're either shooting on an ARRI Alexa if you're shooting a film, or you're shooting on a red camera. And I just chose red here because I had access to some red conversion LUTs. So Red Gamma 4 is basically Red's customized Rec 709 color space gamma curve. So this is as if you were shooting Skyrim through a red camera, like say the Red Epic or the Red Dragon or whatever, and you chose their Red Gamma 4 setting on the camera. And then Red Log Film is the same thing. It's meant to use their logarithmic curve, which gives you, when you're shooting in the camera, it gives you more dynamic range. But when we're using it here, all that we're doing is giving ourselves more headroom to push color. We don't have more dynamic range because all of that is handled here, where the ENB effect, not post-process, the ENB effect takes the HDR content, the high dynamic range content from the game, and maps it down to a range that your monitor can see. But when we convert that to this log profile, it gives us more headroom for the color grading. So that's what I use that for. Although, I'll demonstrate really quickly. Let's go down to, let's use this, 5247. If you want, you can totally use that on one of these film looks. So let's say that you don't like the green tone that 5247 has in the mids. Pull up midtones, and right here where it says green, you can start pulling green out. And you can see that actually already affected the image. So the color grading section is really powerful if you're willing to get your hands dirty. But let's say you absolutely royally screw it up. You just did something god awful. Let's just go crazy with it.
Sometimes I miss the soldier's life when I hold my daughter.
Yeah. Let's say you did something nuts, and that looks just awful. That's why I have this nice little toggle. You can turn it off. If you need to reset it, just set everything to 128, and everything will go back to middle gray, which means it'll be ignored, and no changes will be made to the image.
Old friend, patron of the great clan Battlepore.
A name you're sure I know well. I don't. I've never heard that before. Freaking prick.
Oh, did you need something?
No, I'm good, ho. Keep walking.
Yeah? Need something?
So yeah, you can reset it by setting everything to 128. Let's go back to Red Log Film. Let's enable color grading. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you get started with the color grading functionality in CFL, when you have log enabled, you're going to have to expand the image. So to do that, once you expand these out, you have an RGB mode and an HLS mode, which stands for hue, lightness, and saturation. Hue being the color that you want to select, or the color that you want to actually push into this section, and how much of it is determined by the saturation, and lightness determines how bright you want the highlights to be. And so we're going to use that functionality to expand the image. Let's go to the HLS mode. Let's pull the shadows down. And let's pull the highlights up.
You'd be surprised how much work it is selling things that start.
And you can see we have suddenly expanded the image out. So let's toggle on and off the original log profile. And now we've expanded the image, and now it looks kind of normal again. But it's still very flat color-wise. So now we need to start figuring out what kind of look we want to make. Now typically I could do your normal teal and orange look, where you would cool off the shadows and warm up the midtones and highlights. But let's do the reverse of that. Let's cool off the highlights and warm up the shadows. So let's go back to RGB mode. Let's pull some blue out of the shadows. And let's pull some green out. And you can see we've made the shadows kind of brown there. Now let's go up to the highlights, go back to the RGB mode. And let's pull some red out. And let's pull some green out. Actually, leaving some of that green in kind of looked nice.
Might suit you.
So now that we have our colors defined by what we chose here, you can go back to this HLS mode, and now you have a saturation control for that color because it sets the hue based on what you did here. So now I can push more of the color we selected into the highlights. And the same goes for the shadows now. So that made the shadows a little too bright, so you can go to the lightness. And we can pull those down. And let's saturate this a little more. And now we're looking like maybe we have a little too much green in the middle area of the image. So you go down to the midtones and let's pull some green out.
They want to back the storm cloaks, they'll get what's coming to them.
Not too much, maybe pull a little red out too. And now we're starting to look really nice here. So maybe we need to lift the midtones up a bit because we're looking a little underexposed.
I work with my mother. Sell fruits and
Now,
veggies.
you can
It's fun
create your own
mostly,
contrast curve here
hard work.
by adjusting the lightness of the midtones. But personally, I don't recommend doing that. Set the image in midtones and all so that everything looks nice and not too dark and not too bright. And then if you want some contrast, go up here and apply it with the contrast curves in the camera section, which actually applies before the log profile. And so that's like a much more natural way to get more contrast in the image. And you can see here, that's starting to look really great. Let's saturate the middle area a little bit more. And a little bit more of this color in the top end. Turn the ENB menu off. And you can see that we've created a look here. And that looks nice and Skyrim-y. Yes, I'm pretty sure I didn't invent that word, but I just did make it up on the fly.
Did you know that
Okay,
fruits that actually
so
grow
let's
better
close all these out. We've got our look. So what post-saturation is kind of self-explanatory. I think I already went over that. So what does this fade thing do? In order to demonstrate that, I'm going to go over to these steps here. Okay, and you can see that there's some blackness at the bottom of these steps, the shadow area. As I turn off ENB, you can see it's kind of already there in the game. So what the fade does is it fades both the shadows and the highlights an equal amount while it leaves the midtones the same. So the general exposure of the image, the brightness in the middle area remains the same, but the shadows get lifted while the highlights get brought down. So here we go. And you can kind of see what I'm talking about. The mid-range of the image remains the same. If you watch this column here, not much is really changing all that much about the brightness of it. It's basically just affecting the shadows and the highlights. So, you know, you can fade that. And the purpose of that is to kind of maybe make it look a little bit more like a photo. You can go extreme with it. You can push it all the way up to 50 if you'd like. But, you know, just set it to taste. And I'm only going to put a little bit, maybe in the 20-something range. And now that completes our look. Which, now that I'm looking at it, maybe there's a bit too much blue in the highlights. So go back in here and go to highlights and go to HLS mode. Let's pull some saturation down. And there we go. Maybe there's too much red in the midtones. So let's go here and let's pull some red out. And maybe need to pull the brightness down on it a bit. Yeah, there we go. That's nice.
Something.
Yes?
And there you go. Real-time color grading in CFL. And that doesn't look too bad at all. So that about does it for the new features in CFL 132. I'll catch you guys in the next video.